Hey, good morning. We'll get started 5 past. Alexa should be on here in a minute. Morning, Ben.
Morning, Chris.
If you're on the TOC and you dialed in, please speak up because I can't figure you out from your phone number.
Good morning, Chris. This is Arun.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well.
We'll get started in a couple minutes past.
Chris,
Hey, Alexis. You sound a little bit soft, so I don't know if your mic settings are...
I had a accident with this microphone last week. I left it in my trousers and put them in the washing machine. I do
No worries.
have a spare one, but I think I'm okay with this one.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a little bit light. It's not too bad. We'll get started in 2 minutes.
Great.
Is Yuri and Aaron here from...
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect, cool. Thanks. Hey, Camille. Morning.
Morning.
Is Ken Owens on at all? Hey, Ken, are you on? Is that you? Mr. Owens. All right, it's about 5 past. We'll get started in a bit. On the TOC end.
Hello.
Hey, Ken, good to hear you. On the TOC end, I have Benjamin, Alexis, Ken, and Camille recorded as attending. Is Brian, Bran, or Cantrell here, Solomon, or Jonathan?
Hey, Ken too.
Okay, got you. Anyone else from the TOC that I missed?
Louis, free.
All right. I'll see if anyone else comes on. Alexis, I'm going to go kick it off to you, okay?
Okay. Hang on.
No worries. You're typing furiously.
Yeah, I'm trying to do everything at the same time. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back. This is the first TOC meeting after the governing board meeting. So we have a bit of a readout from that. We just did a name call, agenda, principles. So just to slide 6, principles. We had some discussion about this last week with the governing board. The statement is that we are planning to get this document into a shape where it can be ratified by the governing board on a schedule, which, if I remember correctly, is the next GB meeting, which is in December. Chris, can you confirm that schedule?
Yeah, it's in September.
In September. So we are in good shape here. If people who are on the TOC who wish to contribute on an ongoing basis to this discussion may do so. There are new questions coming in from governing board members on the document comments, and it is currently a living document. Particular topics of interest include, of course, governance, budget, etc. So I invite you to continue to take an interest in this document and keep an eye on things. Now let's move on to slide number 7. There were 2 asks made to the governing board. If you click on the link you can see the deck that I presented. What's that, Chris? You gonna say something?
No, nothing. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Hang on a second. So the deck has essentially a picture of a typical set of needs for an open source project. I actually interrogated Matt Klein from Envoy to get more info about that. And then some information about what Kubernetes needs, as that's an example of an extremely large project. And then some discussion about what we're going to do about it. And there were two outcomes of that. One was that the CNCF will in the future have something called a service desk, which, Chris, maybe you could describe that. I think you and Dan are going to build this.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically looking for a centralized way that projects can make requests to the CNCF staff for services such as, design work, website help, CI help, basically anything, and just kind of have a simple centralized place with an SLA place. That's basically it. So pretty much a standard service desk.
So this is aimed at projects who want to know what's available from the CNCF in terms of what we're calling services, i.e. ways to help projects, and to make it public who's using what, and have a process for requesting new services. The idea is to encourage us to have a sense of accountability around helping our projects, which I think is a good thing. Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay. The other area of discussion was around Kubernetes specific needs around documentation, which is one of several areas where the project's staggering growth has led to the penalties that come with success. There is some discussion around putting some resources into this that would come out of the various CNCF members, and I hope we can have an update from Dan and Chris with whatever wording we agreed at the meeting to share with everybody as soon as possible. Do you think that's going to happen this week, Chris? Just the update on that, or do you think it's going to take a bit longer?
Give it I'm going to try within a week or two. So
okay, great. I understand that sometimes the language can be a bit complicated on these things. Okay, so that's the news on the GB meeting. And one other thing that I will add is I was asking the GB to participate more in TOC affairs and communicate more with the TOC, and I think that's a mutual request. I think the TOC should, anyone on the TOC, whether you have a vote or you're just dialing in, it doesn't matter. You should feel free to use the public lists to communicate across the different parts of the organization. I think that will improve awareness of what exactly we're trying to achieve and get people to rally around common goals. Okay, on those common goals, actually, there was quite a lot of discussion around marketing, but I won't talk about that because it's someone else's problem. All right, so project review and backlog. Again, we went through these last week. Project priorities is a spreadsheet, review backlog is a spreadsheet. Currently, we are waiting to move the notary proposal forward towards a vote. We have a sponsor, Solomon. We have a written document, which it follows the template about notary, and I'm pretty happy to move this forward. I think we're still in a window of people reviewing it. So I'm going to ask everybody in the TOC now, go take a look at the notary proposal and send comments, put them in the document or send them to the list or send them to the notary team, and Chris and me just send comments. And we can get this thing voted on once we've had some DD on it.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. So now it's time for a project proposal. This is from the Jaeger team at Uber. Is Yuri and Aaron, are you ready to take over?
Yeah, is it okay if we project?
Chris, is it okay?
Yeah, sure. Go for it if you want to.
Sounds good. Okay, guys, you have the con.
Awesome. Looks good for me.
You can see that, right?
Yeah, looks great. Go ahead.
Cool. All right, thank you. Jaeger's distributed tracing system. I'm a technical lead on our tracing team, and Aaron is a manager on the team. So we'll kind of do the presentation together. So first, I just want to spend like 1 minute to talk about why distributed tracing and why we think it's actually in need in the industry. So distributed tracing as a tool is really a transaction monitoring for microservices, and it's different from traditional monitoring tools with like metrics and logging in the sense that as architectures have evolved from single-threaded to like multi-threaded to asynchronous to microservices, the monitoring of those transactions within microservices has become very difficult because you now have to travel through multiple threads, through multiple process boundaries in order to collect the information about one single request going to the architecture. And distributed tracing solves that particular issue and allows you to both monitor those transactions and perform root cause analysis on them. And the way distributed tracing works is on the principle of context propagation, where in this example on the left, where if we have a request coming into a top-level service in the architecture, we associate a certain context with that request, a virtual context. For tracing purposes, we can store unique trace ID in that context, but it could have other data, metadata as well. And then, as long as this context is propagated throughout all the call graph, we can collect data about that request and that transaction and present a concise view, like a timeline view and all other ways of investigating and drilling down into that request.
Someone is typing very loudly next to their keyboard. Could they?
Yeah. Hey, Alexis, can you mute yourself? Thanks.
So distributed tracing ecosystem today, the space itself has started in early 2000. There are like different papers coming out, like X-Trace, Magpie, Dapper. Today, large companies typically have in-house closed source tracing systems like Google and Facebook. There are some cloud solutions that big cloud providers have, like Spec and X-Trace. There are a bunch of different commercial vendors that provide tracing in a way. Of the big open source projects in the tracing space are Zipkin and Jaeger. There are others, but they're probably like a bit smaller than that. And as well, the CNCF Open Tracing project is definitely one of the cornerstones, which is an instrumentation API required for tracing to actually work across different technologies. So now on to Jaeger. Jaeger, as I said, is just yet another tracing system. It was founded at Uber. We started it as actually, it grew up as a kind of clone of Zipkin, but eventually evolved into something different. And it was started as part of our overall observability effort. So our team sits next to like metrics team and a logging team, and we work together with as a single observability group. Jaeger was built with open tracing support from ground up. We were actually active participants in the open tracing standard and early adopters, one of the early adopters of it. Internally, Jaeger at Uber is integrated with over 1,000 microservices. And because Jaeger instrumentation provides context propagation as a general principle, there are several projects at Uber which are built on top of that. They're not even tracing related, but they use the context propagation provided by tracing libraries. Our team obviously is focused in part on Uber internal needs, but we also have a mandate to spend time to maximize the value of tracing in the industry and kind of promote tracing as a monitoring tool. And as part of that, we actually invest in features which are not necessarily needed internally. Like we recently released Elasticsearch backend, which we're not using internally, but we just did it because there was an ask from open source for that, and so we worked on that. And we will do the same thing with MySQL storage backend. Now, in terms of features of Jaeger as a tracing system, as I mentioned, it's a kind of a Dapper-based in principle. It can go. We have full open tracing support both in instrumentation libraries and in backend data model, and we support 4 programming languages on instrumentation side with more to come. Instrumentation libraries are considered explicitly part of the project, meaning that when we do releases or any sort of features, everything is tested, integration tested together to ensure interoperability on the wire and with the backend. We support multiple storage backends. Internally, we use Cassandra. Elasticsearch just came out, memories for like toy examples, and potentially other backends will come in the future. Some of the features that Jaeger has may be somewhat unique and other open source projects don't have. For example, we have implemented adaptive per endpoint sampling, which is very important for like large API services which have very different QPS per endpoint. And the typical way of tracing libraries where you have just one sampling probability per service doesn't work very well for that. We're also working on a real-time data pipeline and aggregation, which will be part of the open source as well. As I mentioned, we support baggage propagation as part of the open tracing standard, but we also started working on implementing controls for the baggage propagation so that not everyone can just stick any values and screw the requests. And finally, because Jaeger grew out of kind of Zipkin data model originally, it can still be used as a drop-in replacement for Zipkin if people have already instrumentation in their services. You can replace either the backend with Jaeger because we can accept Zipkin formatted spans, or we also interoperate with Zipkin libraries on the wire with certain configuration options. So both of these are possible. And this is an example of Jaeger UI. It's a React-based UI. We designed it to be embeddable into other applications, which we're using that internally. It's a React-based, as I said. I think at that point, I'll let Aaron continue.
All right. All right. So Jaeger and open source. We recently open sourced it a little over 3 months ago. We've been really excited by the reception that we've gotten within the open source community. Red Hat came and started working with us directly on it and adopted it for their Ocular project. It's actively being considered or adopted by a lot of other companies. So if you sort of graph out the interest that we've received over the past several months, it's very much up and to the right. There's a lot of companies that are taking it seriously and have expressed a strong interest in adopting it and learning more. Oops. Oh, I accidentally clicked the link. So sorry. Okay. So as far as the community goes, right now we have a substantial amount of full-time support. We have a dedicated team of 7 engineers based in New York City. We have 4 engineers at Red Hat who are working with us as well. So that leads us up to 7 maintainers here at Uber. We're working on the governance model to expand that number. We have over 30 full-time contributors. We recently passed 1,000 stars on GitHub, and we're continuing to grow quickly on that. So to the point of why Jaeger is a good fit for CNCF, it fits a very key and important distributed systems use case. The obvious cases here, you have Prometheus, which fills the logging use case, which fills the metrics use case. Rather, you have Fluentd for logging. Tracing is something that every company that operates at the scale of Uber or operates distributed systems at the scale of Uber is going to need. And there is no project currently in the CNCF portfolio that does this. So we felt like we could be a really good fit and complement these other projects. We also have support for open tracing, which is another CNCF project. We're eager to integrate with other CNCF projects on top of that. We're very much a classic cloud data project. We're a container package, dynamically managed and microservice oriented, and you can deploy us on Kubernetes. We think we align pretty well with the things that we've seen so far in there. How do I go back here? Errors. Yeah. All right, so interest has been growing fast since we were open sourced. I mentioned that we've gotten quite a few companies that have signed on and expressed strong interest. And even since we made this slide a week ago, we've received more interest from others. We're frequently mentioned in comparison to other well-known tracing systems. We're being discussed in a lot of technical blogs and conferences. And that number is increasing as people continue to reach out to us. For open tracing workshops, we're basically the default backend. We're by far the most prominent open tracing solution available. So as far as benefits that the community could get from us, one of the biggest ones we feel is we have a very strong engineering commitment behind this. I mentioned the number of engineers earlier. Uber is very invested in this. A lot of other systems at Uber are being built on top of this, and we're continuing to build heavily on Jaeger. We view it as a core bit of infrastructure, and we want it to be an open-sourced, nicely decoupled system that becomes industry gold standard. Modern features and open-source support. We've done a lot of work to continue to build out new features for Jaeger. We're investing in new development on it, and the industry could benefit as a whole from adopting some of these features that aren't necessarily supported by other tracing systems. and it complements a number of other open source work very well too, like open tracing. So some of the things we're looking for from CNCF, we know that you guys have a lot of expertise in project governance, so we're looking for help on that as we continue to push this outside of Uber and make it more of a community project. We'd like deeper integration with other CNCF projects and other member companies. We're looking to evangelize this project more and hopefully get more people in the industry to use it and benefit from it. So we'd like conference space. We're hoping to get increased visibility and spur more adoption that way. And of course, we'd like to attract more committers. We'd like for this to be a real community project rather than something that's only being developed by Uber and Red Hat right now. All right, questions? I guess it looks.
I had a question. This is Quinton from Huawei. You covered what you're sort of hoping to get from association with CNCF, and there may be some overlap with the answer to my question. But what are your biggest challenges at the moment? What are the the big pain points for the project at the moment?
The big pain points. I feel like the project is in a pretty good state in general. I think that the biggest thing we're looking for is probably we'd like for it to become a gold standard within industry and widely adopted. And we've got some pretty good adoption and things are moving in the right direction now, but we'd really like to increase that and take it to the next level.
And the biggest barriers to adoption at the moment that you're aware of?
Probably knowledge within industry, I would say. I mean, we mentioned we've only been open source for about 3 months, right? So we have a lot of work to do with evangelizing among industry. Like we'd like to get to the point where everybody who works with distributed systems and considers themselves to be an expert in that space has at least some knowledge of Jaeger.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea of distributed tracing hasn't synced enough into a lot of engineers' minds. Like by judging by engineers at Uber, a lot of people don't know what distributed tracing is and why it's important for the distributed architecture. So I think being a prominent monitoring tool in the CNCF umbrella will help with that, like for the whole industry.
Thanks. That was a good answer.
Could you say a bit more about the state of integration with Kubernetes and your thought about tracing within Kubernetes itself and how you're thinking of approaching this in the community?
So I mean, there was a pull request which at some point got abandoned for some other technique. There's some events in the Kubernetes to actually integrate open tracing. So that's as far as current integration goes. I mean, Jaeger itself can be easily spun off on Kubernetes, obviously, as a kind of microservices-based system. But the integration points that I do see is that because system like Kubernetes itself is complex, it has lots of moving parts and different processes. So if you want to troubleshoot that, then I can easily see tracing being one of the valuable tools for monitoring Kubernetes itself and root cause analysis in it. So it doesn't have to be Jaeger, like as long as Kubernetes is instrumented with open tracing, it could be any tracer, but you would need to compile some tracer with it. And so like if Jaeger would be part of CNCF, then it kind of would be a natural fit to do that.
So certainly event processing within Kubernetes has become a bit of a complicated thing, but putting that aside, are you or Red Hat working on Helm charts or some other way to get Jaeger installed for, let's call it application use on a cluster? Has anyone done this yet, or is it well, it looks easy, but someone ought to try it?
I think it's the latter. I don't think anyone has tried that yet in anger.
We tried it, Bob. This is Alexis from Weaveworks, and we got it working very quickly.
Oh, nice.
Just a quick question. Can you dive a little bit more on kind of the differences between Zipkin and essentially Jaeger? Is this a drop-in replacement? I know they're written in different languages, but I'd kind of like you to expand a little bit on the actual differences here.
Zipkin and Jaeger in feature parity are very close to each other. Zipkin probably has a bit more backend support as it's been out a lot longer. I think the main difference that we see is one is Zipkin essentially has only one full-time committer, and as such, it's been, like Adrian has been doing a great job on it, but he just doesn't have the cycle to actually go and build new features in Zipkin. So the project relies on essentially contributions from other teams, and as a result, essentially the new features in Zipkin in the past have only been new backends. There are no actual tracing features available, like no client libraries.
Okay, sounds. And I'm sure that was probably one of the motivations of building your own thing. So cool, makes sense. Any other questions for the folks? If there are no other questions, I'll hand it back to Alexis. One thing to note is, the project is looking for a formal TOC sponsor. So
Yes.
If there's someone from the TOC that is willing to sponsor, please let me know.
We've already asked him. He's on vacation, but Brian Cantrill, who, as you know, a lifelong interest in tracing.
Okay, all right, cool.
Is keen to help and is already in touch with Yuri and Aaron and the rest of the team.
Perfect.
So, Chris, could you coordinate the next steps in terms of getting a proposal out?
Yeah, definitely. We'll get a proposal and share it on the TOC GitHub over the next week or so. So thanks.
Thank you. So we can still see your screen, Uber folks. Thanks. Okay, not a huge amount else today, unless somebody wants to table a new issue. The working groups are moving forward. I think, Ben, did you agree to do a storage readout pretty soon? Ben Heineman, I think you're on the call.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Sure.
Can we get that scheduled, Chris? Because I think it's time to hear from the storage folks.
Yeah, I'll try to schedule something either next time or the time after. We have Ken from Serverless Land doing a quick update, so today at least.
Yeah, and then networking is coming soon, and then I think we need to get the CI Chris Cloud demo done as well.
Yeah, CI will be scheduled for next meeting, August 15th.
Okay, so Ken, are you going to do the serverless today?
I am.
Okay, over to you.
Okay. So in terms of serverless, if you look at slide 31, the objective today was just kind of give a quick update. When we started the work group, there were a lot of discussions internally in the TOC among us if we should actually do anything within the serverless area. And so the goal that we all agreed to was that we should, try to provide some clarity in terms of terminology and the scope of the space as it exists today, realizing that over time this will change. We wanted to try to identify any community or aspects that would kind of harmonize interoperability opportunities with cloud native. And the end result of our discussions with it would be great to kind of create a position paper or a white paper. We haven't decided with the TOC yet which way we'll name it. But kind of what is serverless in relation to cloud native. And so today's update is just to announce that we have the first draft of that white paper available for review. Just a reminder, if you want to get involved in our work group or follow our progress, you can click on that link below and it'll take you to the GitHub site. But before I get into the document, from the request that we have from the serverless work group back to the TOC, is we'd like you to review the draft against the goals that we set out for the work group. Provide any critical guidance you may have in terms of what we need to try to look at next. And then as we look at next steps, I have some thoughts later on what we're kind of looking for next steps. In terms of the white paper, I put a link in this PowerPoint to the document. And it basically consists of an abstract terminology section, which is mostly agreed to by everyone on the work group, but I think that's where there'll be a lot of discussions within the TOC. We have a positioning section that kind of talk about how serverless is used today and what, with in relation to like PaaS and other offerings in the marketplace, how does it sort of relate or how do you position it? We kind of had a scoping part of the white paper to try to scope serverless in terms of cloud native. And then we had a use case section because we kind of felt like without use cases, it wasn't really easy to explain why you would care about serverless. And so we put a use case section in, and then we ended the white paper with a functional spec. And it's a very high level functional spec, so it's not anything like a requirement or a standards definitions, right? But it's sort of just a high level functional specification around the definition and the requirements needed to meet the use cases. And then, lastly, the next steps that we're looking for is sort of, what do we need to do in order to finalize the white paper and release it through either the CNCF or the Linux Foundation channels or both. Kind of request the TOC determine based on this effort, what are the next steps? And I put a couple of examples, right? We could either, continue under review, and then each quarter, some period of time, we would come back together as a TOC and review what the next steps are. We could continue and try to set direction for this landscape and how cloud native and serverless work together. Or we could basically kind of disband now and say, hey, we have a white paper, we're successful with this work group, and then, we can reevaluate each quarter or some other schedule to be determined as to when we want to do something more specific to serverless. So that's sort of the update from the work group. Any questions? So Chris and Alexis, I think the request I would have is that maybe 2 weeks from now, before as we meet again as a TOC, that we would have had the TOC members review and provide comments on the draft.
Okay.
If that's too soon, we can do 4 weeks if you want.
I think we can certainly start doing that. I think just looking at the document again, there's so much in here. What would help is a couple of things. Number one, I think it would help if you or somebody who's a major member of the working group could lead a discussion on the mailing list just about what's important and what's not, that can happen asynchronously over the next few weeks to remind people what to look at and generally guide us through the document. Secondly, I think that in prior discussions around this, the number one topic that came up again and again was interoperability. What can we do about interoperability here? I think that for me is the priority, but others may disagree and offer their own view. I think we need to agree what is the priority. I think that should be our goal as we get to the next readout in 2 or 4 weeks' time.
Sounds great. I will have Doug, who would have been here today, except he's on vacation as well as others. So I'll have Doug, when he gets back from vacation next week, I'll send out something to the mailing list this week, but I'll have Doug sort of follow up often in the next 2 weeks with specific topics and try to get a discussion going on the mailing list. I think that's a great idea, Alexis.
Thank you. And just in passing, there are other projects. Richard Hartman is trying to pull together this open metrics thing, which came out of the world of Prometheus, which may or may not have relevance for this. I don't know. And secondly, I'm really keen that the open source projects that are already successful are contributing to this discussion. I know that some of them have been, but it would be good to know if there are any others that we need to talk to. Okay.
Yep, makes sense.
Thank you, everybody.
And actually, Alexis, this is Lee Calco. Really quick on your, top of mind for you on interoperability. Can you say more real quick? Or is that interoperability in and amongst serverless implementations, or between functions and containers, or what?
Well, this is something that I think was first articulated to me by Todd Moore from IBM. He was like, at the end of the day, you're going to use one of these implementations because you're sending data into them and you're getting data out. In a sense, they implement a functional service for you. Therefore, having a way of framing or constraining or defining or standardizing what that data is of interest, so that somebody could write implementations that work with different functions as a service capabilities. I think that was kind of one take on interoperability. And I think that would lead to other benefits too, because there are other subcomponents of other PaaSes and things which will have the same kinds of functional behavior. You could benefit from the same standardization.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I totally agree. You want to be able to, and part of it too is just being able to take your functions with you wherever you may be running them.
There you go. So that was the sense in which I might interrupt in this case.
I had one last question. It's Quentin again.
Hi, Quentin.
Does the working group, and this may be somewhat controversial, but does the working group see itself doing some kind of comparison? It seems to me there are a very large number of superficially competing open source and proprietary products in the space, and it's, from a consumer point of view, it's pretty difficult to get an idea of how they differ and how they're similar. Would that be a useful exercise for the working group to undertake?
I think that sounds like the kind of thing that somebody in the executive staff could actually fund somebody to do, because I think it's quite a substantial piece of work. I mean, there is some prior art here, which is created by none other than Lee Calcutt, who spoke earlier. He's created a very impressive spreadsheet that describes in the container networking space pretty much everything you could possibly ask about the individual projects there, which is very useful to people who care about such things. It is quite a lot of work to do that, and I think it probably would be useful. I'm not sure if we're ready to ask Dan and Chris to commission that yet.
And then just take a look at the positioning section of the white paper, because we kind of started a little bit of that, and even try to compare with some of the PaaS offerings in the marketplace as well. And so, but yeah, to your point, I think that Alexis is sort of where the work group was sort of formed to start the process, and where we take it next is open for discussion for sure.
Yeah, this is Dan Cotton. Let me just go ahead and say that if the work group wanted to put together a spreadsheet and say, here's the columns that we would like we'd be very happy to commission either Lee Calcutt, or I hear there are other actual technical marketing people out there, but I've been thrilled with Lee's work in the past. So if he were interested, or others wanted to volunteer, we'd be very comfortable funding that and just having that as an ongoing shared document.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. Is it my slide again now, Ken? I'm on 34. Yeah, okay.
Yep, it's back to you.
Okay, so there is a request for information whether can there be a TOC face-to-face meeting in, I believe it is in Los Angeles in September.
September 11th through 14th.
Yeah. I personally will not be traveling in early September, but if there is a quorum of TOC voting members and sufficient interest from non-voting members, I think it would make sense to get together and network, socialize, discuss ideas. So
I know I'll be there on the 12th.
Great. Anyone else planning to go? Well, let us know, and Chris and Ken will be there. So you can
I'll reach out to the mailing list and see if we'll do this or not. We have the space reserved, so it's just a matter if you want to take advantage of it or not.
Right. Thank you. So that leads.
Sorry to interrupt you, Alex. So I think if we did, not that we need to get together, but if we did get together, it might be a good time to address some of the topics around, like, the networking and CI and serverless, and where we take these things next.
I think it's going to be a challenge, Ken, to make September work. I'd like to aim for December, likely the day before KubeCon, Cloud Native Con.
No worries, Dan.
And I'm actually, I'll go ahead and put a marker down that I'm aiming to get all 9 TOC members together for that, if at all possible.
Yeah, let me actually second that comment. I'm very keen that we do have another chance to get together if we can this year. And I think the best opportunity is Cloud Native Con, KubeCon in the USA near the end of the year.
Yep, I know I'll be there.
Are we aiming for December 5th? What day are we aiming for?
What day, Dan?
I'm going to say December 5th. It's also the Kubernetes Dev Summit. So we'll just need to coordinate there with Brian Grant around it, but I think we could probably pull him out for an hour or two. So probably the afternoon of the 5th, or possibly evening of the 5th. And then I'll also say that we're trying to volunteer all of you to have a session, possibly a keynote session, the next day to talk about CNCF from the TOC's perspective, and that Chris is submitting an entry for that.
Was that like a panel or something?
Yeah, so we'd love to have a panel that he moderates.
Awesome. Great. Fun. Okay. Any questions about the conferences in December for anyone else? Cool. So we're on the last slide. Next meeting will be Envoy, and the CI team will be giving us a readout, and we may have some other updates from working groups in the same time frame. We hope to also hear back from the Notary team to see if there's progress there, and we're ready for a vote. Anyone else want to add any items for next time or bring anything up today? Then we are concluded for today. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Awesome.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Bye.